and welcome to another exciting pirate news video. Today is May 10th, and we're coming to you live. I'm your quartermaster of the Massachusetts chapter. With me, up in the left-hand corner, or actually that would be right-hand corner, but we have Steve, and then we also up above me on my right would be your fearless captain Jamie, trying to switch things up a little bit so that way it's not just doing Jamie's face all the time. Try and keep it interesting for you, and I even shaved for this occasion just for you.
Woohoo!
Um, so, gentlemen, how are you doing this evening?
All right.
The phrase same old" kind of comes to mind, but it is what it is.
It is. I mean, it's been trying times uh, with everything going on. So let's just jump right down to the facts. What are we currently at with the whole COVID uh, status, Steve?
Well, in terms of overall cases, Massachusetts is still third in the United States. We have, I believe somewhere on the order of 76,000. The death rate is at about 4,800. So we are still in one of the hot spots in the Northeast.
Mm.
I know that the state set up a number of field hospitals to deal with to deal with patients, a surge of patients, essentially. The DCU Center in Worcester was one. There was another field hospital out on Cape Cod. I recently read that the Cape Cod Field Hospital is being closed. It had 94 beds, but so far none of them have been used, which is actually, well, it's either a good thing in the sense that we didn't need them, or it's a misallocation of resources. I don't know which. I'm going to be the optimist and say, it was a good it was a good precautionary measure, but to the extent that we haven't had to use them, that's probably not a bad thing. But ultimately, this is a new virus. We're still learning about it. It's contagious. It has a long incubation period, and we're going to be socially distancing ourselves, at least here in Eastern Massachusetts, for the foreseeable future.
Mm. So, in terms of that, what was it? The hospitals in the local area were just able to handle all the cases, or?
That I don't know. The source for this is a CBS News article. It doesn't elaborate on why the emergency beds were not needed. It just states that they were not, and the hospital is being decommissioned as a result.
Well, knock on wood. That's a good thing, and hopefully it stays that way. And there's not a second wave that really will bring that going up forward. That being said, while we've been fighting this, and we've all been together fighting this, there have been some sneaky characters trying to push through things that we're just not going to let them get away with. Jamie, you know more about this particular act that they're trying to push.
Right. So back in March, when all this was kicking off, some senators tried to push the Earn It Act, which is S 3398. Essentially, what it would do is it would. So we have the section 230, which allows, which basically says any internet provider, say Facebook or Twitter or your newspaper, if someone posts something, they're not liable provided the website's not liable provided they have a way of taking it down, say if it's copyright infringement or something like that.
Mm.
The Digital Millennium Copyright Act.
Right. Oh,
Yes,
actually, I
yes.
think this is the Communications Decency Act.
Oh, sorry.
I think it's
Okay,
section
but go ahead. Sorry.
But whatever. In other words, it indemnifies them so long as they don't. So long as people aren't using it in the wrong way, and they're dealing with it appropriately. But the problem that we have is with the Earn It Act, and we already saw this with FOSTA and SESTA, where they removed that if you could be in any way tangentially, slightly, down the corner, going and helping sex trafficking, then you can lose that. You can lose the ability to. You can lose the site can lose the protection, and as a result of losing the protection, they can be sued. So now they want to do this such that sites, if they're not following a set of rules that the Justice Department will put together, a set of best practices, then they can lose their 230 protection. And as a result of that, what we think is going to happen is they're going to try and get backdoors into things like WhatsApp or Signal or Apple Messenger or things like that, such that they can be wiretap friendly, which is the actual term that's used for the current phone system. It has to be wiretap friendly so that they can go and listen into all your calls, and they want to be able to listen into your communications on the internet as well, even if it's encrypted. And
that's interesting. So Section 230, I've always understood it as being one of the fundamental things that allowed the internet as we know it to exist. The indemnification of, site operators. So the difference would be, for example, under Section 230 now, someone could post something on Facebook or Twitter, and Facebook or Twitter is not responsible for what that individual says, but if so ordered, they do have a responsibility to remove that content. So the other alternative would be, say, I post something on Twitter, and in order to prevent indemnification, someone from Twitter, or be it a person or an algorithm, has to say, okay, I think this is okay. So there's it's a very what Section 230 did was allow for a very different dynamic. It allows you to makes Section 230 makes the assumption that people will generally behave themselves. Whereas removing that protection means that any website that hosts a significant amount of other people's content has to really, it makes it less worthwhile for them to do so. And it is, it's a way of, it will have, at least in my opinion, having everything to having the situation where everything had to kind of be pre-screened to go out would have prevented a lot of Facebook, YouTube would have, it just would not have gone as far as it did, and it wouldn't have as much use as it has now. So what if I've understood you correctly, Jamie, what you're saying is that the government's plan is to, or the Justice Department's plan is to impose a set of guidelines, and it with the intention of possibly using this as sort of soft leverage in the future to gain sort of universal encryption keys, or just access to it. Basically, it would be used as a way to leverage to obtain backdoors that currently don't exist.
I mean,
that is certainly one of the fears, yes, and one of the likelihoods.
Seems like it's just such a slippery slope that we don't really want to go down. And once we open up these back doors, whatever the good justification is, it does open it up to people who would not have the best intentions. By any means.
If the back doors are there, it's not just the FBI that's going to have access to them.
Oh, right.
No doubt Chinese state security, or Russian state security, or whomever will try to get those keys and figure it out.
Or any hacker with
Or any hacker, yeah, absolutely.
Anyone who has a strong desire to do social engineering. I mean, there have been
Right.
studies that if a person attempting to do social engineering knows a little bit about you, can talk to you on terms that you're familiar with, and get you to let your guard down. Or the most common one is, establish rapport and get the person to and take advantage of someone's nature and desire to help you out.
Right.
If you provide access to a lot of personal information about people, I think that has the potential to make their job easier.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
one thing that I find ironic is, the phone company is not liable if I say something illegal over the phone line, right? I already have immunity. So why is it we can't, and we currently have a situation where Signal or WhatsApp or whatever are not liable for what I communicate through their system. But now they would say, well, we're going to remove that liability unless you let us spy on people.
Liability protection.
Exactly. Yeah, we'll remove the liability protection unless unless the companies let the federal government spy on them, which also has First Amendment implications. Do we really want Trump's Justice Department, which hasn't in any way shown an interest in non-Trump supporters' First Amendment rights, to actually be determining what is valid under the First Amendment and what isn't?
Or anyone else after him.
So as a practical standpoint, to the extent that one possible outcome of something like this is that it just pushes people to other platforms that they're using. So instead of using YouTube or whatever, you start using TikTok or if you think about it, one of the ways that you can if you'd like to maintain some sovereignty of yourself, you can use a service provider that is based in a different country.
Right.
So that being said, sorry to cut you off,
go ahead,
Steve, but as always, we are very interested in protecting your privacy and having a fight for protecting the privacy. So there is a couple new things coming out for that, but just to finish this conversation, what I wanted to really say is annoy your legislator, make sure that they're opposing this, make sure you give them a quick call and tell them that you are just against this act and that they should be against this act as well.
Call Warren and Markey.
Yep. And just make sure that we're blocking this, or anyone else listening even further out there, just annoy your legislator. Make sure this gets stopped, because this is bad. But that being said, in other fronts for privacy, there was something that you were telling me earlier, Jamie, that there's an employer snitch line.
So the states of Ohio, Iowa, and Texas, in order to get people to go back to work, since they're trying to open things up as quickly as possible and get things back to normal, even though we're dealing with a pandemic that in no way is normal, they've created snitch lines that employers can rat out their employees who have decided, say in the case of Tyson Foods, where they've decided that the employee has said, I don't feel safe going to work for you, I'm going to stay on unemployment. The employers, through these snitch lines, could notify the state of this, and then the state would kick them off unemployment. So recently someone came up with a toolkit you can use, and it's open source free software to basically swamp these snitch lines, these websites, with so much bogus, useless reports, and that they have too many things to go through, and they'll never get around to kicking people off.
This almost sounds like using the net neutrality strategy.
Well, in reverse, yeah.
So that being said, there's a couple other things that government's really trying to push through with contact tracing. Steve, do you have a little bit more on that? At least on
So,
the technical side.
I mean, I'm aware of several efforts to, do contract tracing through cellular data, and I just want to emphasize that, two mobile phones being in the same, it's not so much contact tracing as proximity tracing. You have two mobile phones that happen to be in the same area at the same time. Um, it strikes me as one of the, as being at least somewhat similar to one of the NSA's programs where they, were trying to, if take a person of interest and find all of the mobile devices that came near that person of interest. And in the case of, an infectious disease, sure, I mean, possibly it might be a good place to start, but it's you know, it's no guarantee. The fact that you were in close proximity to someone it's not necessarily a guarantee that you were exposed. Close proximity could be in two adjacent vehicles, for example,
Or rooms.
or rooms.
From what I understood of those apps, a lot of them were just like, let's just give away all of our information, like to everybody or to the void unknown, and just be like, oh, I'll trust the wider existence to know all of my information.
No, I think this goes to something that we've been saying for a long time. I understand the desire to find a needle in a haystack, but a strategy that produces more and more hay is not necessarily the best way to do that. If you have someone who to me at least, not being an infectious disease, infectious diseases are not my background. I mean, I would think that an interview with someone would be, a starting point.
Right. I mean, through real legitimate contact tracing, you can figure out who they've come into contact with. As you said, with these proximity detectors, they're going to give you far too many false positives that, that may or may not mean that someone has been exposed or hasn't been exposed.
Mm-hmm.
It's just going to bog down the people who have to look at the apps, the contact tracers. It's not an efficient way of doing it. And we have so many people unemployed. Why don't we just put them to work doing that?
Yeah.
They can do that over the phone.
And with that being said, that's about all the time we have today. Viewers out there, thank you for watching us. Definitely give us a thumbs up and a like and all that. Spread the word. It really, really helps the algorithms too. If you start leaving comments down there, I will read them. Even if they're nonsensical, I will still read them. So, and we'll discuss them as well. So please, by all means, don't be shy. I would love to hear this conversation get really going. So annoy your legislators and fight for what is right. Gentlemen, thank you very much. And
Thank you both very much.
hope you have a great
Have a good
night.
night.